Without further ado, I think we can go over to our guest speaker of today, Miss Jessica. Just a
Hi,
quick
Ingrid.
just a quick introduction on who Miss Jessica is.
Is that my cue, Ingrid?
The document is taking a while to load now, but I quickly just want to introduce you to our audience.
All right.
Miss Jessica is a Namibian communication and governance professional currently serving as a research and innovation knowledge broker with a background in communications, public governance, and civic engagement. She has contributed to strategic initiatives across local, regional, and international platforms with a focus on rights, inclusive development, and storytelling for impact. Miss Jessica, that's your cue. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much. I would kindly like to share my screen because I've prepped a sort of presentation in case I am speaking either too fast or in case there's someone that wants to take notes, if that's okay with you. That is me, that is I, as rightfully introduced by Ingrid. So basically, today's session is titled Strategic Communication and Digital Advocacy for Rural Impact. Now, the session is specifically designed to equip us with practical strategies and tools that help us to tell stories or reach our people and influence real life changes in our communities, similar to what RuralRise Empowerment did with their community dialogues. So that is the purpose for this session. How do we communicate in a way that is impactful, in a way that we can basically bring about tangible change within our communities or within the work that we do? Today, we'll specifically focus obviously on rural impact, but depending on which field you're in, whether you're an activist, a youth leader, a teacher, a farmer, or just anyone who cares about communications in general, I think you can still take away points from here that you can factor into your specific fields or in your specific line of work. Just let me know if I'm speaking too fast, if you'd like me to break, and if you'd like me to go back to a slide or not. So I've created a little design here just to give us a visual experience of how communication works. But I would like us to sit back and think of a time when we didn't have cell phones, where we didn't have internet, where we didn't have any means of technological communication like we do now, communicating via Zoom. At the time where we used to sit around the fire and listen to our grandparents tell us stories, or back to a time where we used to basically communicate via letters. So communication in general is still the same, whether it is using it through letters, whether it's through a phone, whether it's through a Zoom call, whatever means of communication, whether it's nonverbal, verbal communication, it is still the same, and it's still trying to drive the same essence throughout all the ages. So for you to be able to be a good communicator, you need to understand why communication actually matters in the first place. Normally, we hear people say communication is the key in relationships, communication is the key in whatever we choose to do. It's because communication builds trust, it builds visibility, and it builds influence. The reason why we are joined today on this call is because RuralRises decided to communicate with experts out there to basically feature on their Ignite Corner. That was done through communications. You being able to sit through the Zoom call is because visibility was there in the way they communicated or in the way they shared the message. And you were influenced in a way or sparked in a way to even register to join the call. So that's what communication does. It builds trust, it creates visibility, and it basically ignites influence across. So rural voices often go unheard. Storytelling can shift that. We have come to know that mainstream media, that being your television stations, your radio stations, or even print media, tend to underrepresent rural voices, right? Not just rural voices, but marginalized communities' voices, that being persons living with disabilities, people living in rural communities, their voices are not heard in mainstream media. So it is important for us as communications practitioners or people communicating within our fields. I'm sorry, someone is writing on the document. I'm not sure if that's also visible on your end, but not a train smash. Yes. So basically, communication is just telling a story. But before you tell a story, you need to be passionate for you to be able to convey that story to your audience. You need to be passionate about a particular topic. You need to be passionate about a particular thing, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's international relations. It has to come from somewhere. It has to be a passion. It has to be a vocation for you to be able to communicate that thoroughly through to your audience. So it is really just storytelling in a more professional and tailor fit way, depending on your audience. Now, strategic communication helps align goals with public interest. Why? Like I mentioned earlier, we are joined here. Probably you're an activist, one is a youth leader, someone is in academia, or you're in the private sector. I heard there's someone here from one economy. It doesn't really matter in which space or industry you work. The importance is that you know how to align your goals with public interest. Public interest, what what does your audience want to hear? What do they want to hear? If you are representing RuralRises as a communications practitioner, you need to understand the audience that you're communicating to. And then you need to basically do research and map out to see what their interests are. What do they want to hear about? Do they want to hear about land issues? Do they want to hear about how to sorry, how to basically start up a soup kitchen, whatever the case might be. You need to first understand your audience. You need to understand who you are talking to, and then you then align your goals to that specific audience. You also need to understand the age group that you're dealing with, and then map out in a way that you're able to communicate strategically with your audience. Specifically, even on this call, we are trying to target rural communities, right? So I cannot speak in huge vocabs. You need to understand, am I speaking to laymen? How do I tailor make my notes to fit the layman terms? When I'm communicating, am I communicating digitally? Will I be able to reach the number of people that I want to reach? Should I go into the communities and basically communicate through flip charts and workshops? You need to understand your audience and be able to find a way that is suitable for you to be able to communicate with them. That is you being strategic about the way you communicate. And when we say what is then strategic communications, this is basically you being purposeful and planning the way you communicate with your audience. Right. So it's the same way when you're planning to host a workshop. You get a budget line, you sit down with your team, you break down the work that has to be done, you give a core task to say you are dealing with invites, you are dealing with A, B, C, and D. So it's the same with communications. When drafting a communication strategy, you need to understand what is the purpose of this communication strategy that I'm drafting. What am I trying to tell my audience? What impact or outcome do I want them to perceive when they see this press release or when they see this Instagram post or when they read this caption? How do I want my audience to feel when they read this? So that's you purposefully planning to communicate with your audience. And then once you have now understood your why am I putting out this press release to address technology facilitated gender-based violence? What is the need for it? And then when you know your why, you build onto that to say, now that I know my why, who am I communicating to, right? Then that's when you now tackle your specific target group, whether it's youth, whether it's people living with disabilities, whether it's women in leadership, whether it's people in the public life. Then you now look at your who. Then you look at your what am I trying to say to this audience? You understand? Then you tackle your what. So the same way you're planning for an event is the same way you plan to communicate with someone. Even if it's just a short press release, you need to understand what contents you want in that press release. And then, of course, you're focused on clear goals and target audience that we spoke about. You need to hit the nail on the head. I can't read your press release or your post or listen to your speech or come to a talk show that you're hosting, and then the first 30 minutes I still haven't grasped the reason why I'm in that venue listening to you. So already from the get-go, people need to understand, why am I here? Because that in itself sparks interest, and that will keep the conversation alive and keep your audience on their toes. So your goals need to be very clear. Understand using less jargon, because really unnecessary talking is just a waste of time. Get straight to the point, say what you have to say, and ensure it has impact and it has a tangible outcome. Understand your target audience in the room, speak to them, look at their body language, look at your room, understand your audience, and ensure that they are alive and connected with what you're saying or what you're writing or what you're putting out to your audience. Communication also involves consistent messaging and appropriate channels. So you can't say we are studying an Instagram page or LinkedIn platform, or we have a website, but it's been domain for over 6 months. You're not communicating anything to your audience. That's not strategic communications. You need to be consistent with how you communicate. That meaning you need to have either a social media rollout plan to know that posting Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Mondays, we are doing Motivation Mondays. On Wednesdays, we are doing Opportunity Wednesdays, depending on which organization you work for and in which field you are. Fridays, we are speaking about Active Fridays, maybe promoting health, or we are depending on what it is, but you need to be consistent. You at least need to share something on your platforms, be it your website, be it your WhatsApp channel, broadcast channel, newsletter, whatever the case might be. You need to communicate at least once or twice a week with your audience, because consistency creates a audience. It creates a sense of belonging, and it just shows your audience that you're keeping them in the loop, that they are important, that they matter. Because the more you communicate, the more you put out content, the more you write to your audience, they feel part of the journey. They feel like they belong. They feel like you are taking them along the journey. But if you're domain for 6 months and then you composed, register to join a workshop, people will be like, okay, but now where have you guys been all these months? You understand? So consistency basically just creates that sense of belonging, and it just allows your audience to be part of the journey, and you're just basically taking them along the journey. So the power of storytelling, right? Stories humanize issues and connect emotionally. So we know about testimonies, right? When you find an evangelic on the street, they will either start with how they became an evangelic, like what happened, you understand? So they want you to connect with why they became an evangelic, or they want you to connect with why they became born again before they can pursue you to become born again. So that's the same as communication storytelling, or rather the power of storytelling. You need to, even as a therapist, you need to first connect with the person emotionally, on an emotional level, before you can even start communicating with the person or start telling a story. So you need to find something that you have in common with these people. For instance, I would like to assume most of us on this call are either communications practitioners, or your work aligns with you having to network, you having to connect with people, or you doing campaigns, whatever the case might be. So you need to find a common ground. So that common ground is it's basically an emotional connection act that you're creating with your audience or the person that you're communicating with. And then from there you build on a story to say that since we both love to drink water, this is what water does for me. This is how water keeps me healthy. And then the next person will say, oh, okay, water also does A, B, C, and D for me. And that's how you tell a story, and that's how you build on telling a story. Now, the cut through noise better than facts alone. That basically says that when you connect with someone, or when we're speaking about the power of storytelling, it allows you to break away from the noise. If you're attending a conference with over 500 people, there's no way you're going to network with all those 500 people. But because you identified specific people that you're going to communicate with, because you understand how you connect on a certain level or the interest that you share, it then allows you to cut through the noise of the 500 and then just focus on the 10. If you're going into a space because you have a charity foundation or you're working on a project and you know that the aim of you attending that particular function is to get funding from a specific donor. Before even going to the conference, like we said, you need to be purposeful and you need to plan. So already you're looking at the event you're attending, you're looking at the type of speakers that will be there, or you're developing partners that will be there. You start doing research, you start to find ways on how you can connect with this person, either by saying, oh, Ingrid, I read your article in the Namibian newspaper of Tuesday, and I loved what you said about the dowries, hydrogen, whatever the case might be. That already is a connect. This person then gets to understand that, oh, okay, Ingrid actually understands the work that I do. So that sparks interest. And then that's when you start communicating with the person and you get what you want to get from them, whether it's funding, whatever the case might be. So you really need to plan whether you're going to network, whether you're going to give a speech, speaking on a panel, moderating a session. You need to understand your audience. It doesn't matter in which space you are, because that in a sense allows you to just have a better connection with them and to cut away from the noise. We'll move on to the tools. I've chosen the ones that we already have because we're working also around budget. How does one that does not have a communication budget at all then ensure that they are visible in a space, right? I know for most of us, the finance team normally loves to cut down on marketing budgets. They like to cut down on PR and comms budgets. So how do I use the tools that are already readily available to me, even as a startup, even as someone that has an advocacy interest and basically just wants to do something to bring about change in their community? You don't have to be a big organization for you to be able to start somewhere, right? You can start from a WhatsApp group. Now, this WhatsApp group can consist of your close friends, close relatives, or even people that commented on a post related to the advocacy work that you are doing. And then within that WhatsApp group, you create an interest, you create trust, visibility, and of course, those members in that WhatsApp group will further on share the information that you share on there. I heard someone said they saw the poster or basically the call to register on a civic platform that came through a channel of communication, whether it was through a friend, through a WhatsApp group, through a voice note, whatever the case might be. So basically, the importance of using the tools that you already have available to you, creating WhatsApp broadcast messages, that is cost effective. Radio call-ins and community shows. Starting a podcast or even something similar to this, the Ignite Corner. You don't necessarily have to go above and beyond to get airtime on your television stations or to be to get a layout in print media, but basically just using what you have available and ensuring that you use the devices that you have to your means, and then you post that on your social media platforms or you share with your community. Facebook, posters, and local influence. Local influence like Wilka Absalom, international relations practitioner. That means that this person probably has a vast understanding of foreign affairs. She has met various stakeholders, whether it's private sector, academia, government. So if you have a friend like Wilka, tap into her space. If you have a friend like the lady from One Economy, tap into her space. It's always important as communicators for you to be able to network and make use of multi-stakeholders in different fields, because what someone who works in finance knows won't necessarily be the same as what someone working with rural communities know. But at the end of the day, there is a way that you can pull together and then create something beautiful. So that in itself is basically you creating trust within your community, you being visible in the way you communicate, and you're showing your audience that that you're going an extra mile for them to be able to feed off the networks that you're making. Ingrid, are we still good? I hope everyone can still hear me. We're moving on to effective messaging and tips. Here we have know your audience and speak their language. You can't go to a community where people only speak Kwekwe and you're going to speak English. It defeats the purpose of the message that you're trying to convey. So you need to either source for a translator, or you can't go to a community where people are hearing impaired and then you don't have a sign language interpreter. So that's you now mapping out, doing research, mapping out your audience and understanding your audience and tailor making whatever you're communicating to them. When I say understand your audience and basically just speak their language, when you're doing community dialogues and you're going up north and you don't speak Oshuambo, find someone within the team that will be able to translate the message. If you're dealing with an audience from the age of 5 to 12, try using graphics or try using animation to be able to communicate with them, but really just understanding and knowing how you communicate with your audience. The same even on social media platforms. The way you communicate with your audience on Twitter won't be the same way you communicate with your audience on LinkedIn, Facebook, or even Instagram, right? On Facebook or LinkedIn, you would be putting lengthy text. On Twitter, you'll probably be doing live tweets. On Instagram, you'll probably be communicating visually. But you also need to understand the same way you're understanding your audience offline is the same way you need to understand your audience online. What type of people follow our platform on Facebook? What are their age gaps? In which work group are they in? Academia? Are they in civil society? Do they focus on human rights issues? You need to understand, and that goes as far as you planning, looking at your analytics, understanding, is it men that follow our platforms? Is it female that follow our platforms? Are these people in government? So according to you understanding your audience, then you'll be able to basically tailor make your audience for that specific audience. So it's the same method online and offline. Be clear, relatable, and solution focused. Refrain from complaining, right? Or seeing a problem and not having a solution to the problem. The reason why you were bothered by something, if you're bothered by something, it means that you have a solution to it or you're trying to find a solution to it. So rather be solution focused. I'm sure when Eslen founded RuralRises, it's because she saw a problem and she had the solution and then she started something that is now bridging that gap. So you need to be solution focused with the way you communicate or with the way you operate, even as a project manager or whatever you're doing in your field. Be relatable, right? If you're hosting a talk show for Gen Zs, don't bring a moderator that is 45 years old, because how can we relate to that moderator? Give us a moderator that the Gen Zs can relate to, someone that will be cool, someone that we can vibe with. That is you being relatable as a communicator. Be clear in the way you communicate. Again, goes as far as to say the way you communicate with persons with disabilities, or the way you communicate with a younger audience is not the same way you communicate with different stakeholders. The way you would communicate with parliamentarians isn't the same you communicate with civil society. You need to understand the language the people speak and just be clear and concise on what you're saying. Use visuals where possible. As I mentioned before, if you're communicating with a very young audience, you would most likely want to use animated videos, pictures, visuals for them to be able to understand what you're trying to say. If you're communicating with persons living with disabilities, I understand that those living with albinism are not able to read small text. So now you understand your audience. So your text will be big and visible enough for them to be able to see and understand what you're communicating. If you're communicating with people that are hearing impaired, you're using visuals. If you're using videos with audio, you know that you need to insert subtitles, or you need to have a sign language interpreter that then translates whatever you're saying in the video. So that just being to say that you need to be visual, because no one wants to sit and listen to someone speak for an hour to 30 minutes and then there's no visuals. For example, if you're posting something on YouTube, you can't just have a voice speaking. We need to see, have a voiceover, have images come in, have short videos, have graphics. So that's how you make your communications more more appealing to your audience. That's how you make your messaging more appealing. The graphics that you use, the coloring that you use, the logos, all that, how you position things, that needs to be appealing to your audience for them to actually be interested and stay throughout the duration of the video, the duration of the call. Then we're looking at digital advocacy tactics. Using hashtags is very important, especially because if you don't have a website or you don't have a strong presence online, what the search engine optimization does is the moment you use hashtags and someone comes to Google and search something in line with your hashtags, it then pulls your information from wherever you posted, if it's it being LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, it pulls that information in and then it draws that person to your content. That's the power of using hashtags. Right? Tag your partners. If you are hosting a workshop in collaboration with 3, 4 different partners, ensure to tag them or mention them in the caption, because if someone then searches a specific partner, then your organization also pops up because of a post that you posted and tagged that partner into. Trending topics. Always hop onto trending topics. Things like Africa Day, or things like Human Rights Day, or things that are basically known on a global platform, on a regional platform, and that also aligns then in a local context. Yes. So basically things like hashtags or tagging key stakeholders, or creating short videos, or engaging reels, those type of things go a long way. We should not underestimate um, the power of the content you create as a communicator or um, marketing practitioner within your workspace. So if you're going into a rural community for community dialogue, right? Don't just tell us in a beautiful press release or article that we went to Kamanyap and we did A, B, C, and D. We want to see what you did, right? So that's you either sharing a reel or creating a little video with the images and things that you took so that people can relate and see what you have done. So I was speaking about tagging your partners and jumping on trending topics. When jumping on a topic that trends, Don't just do it for the sake of doing it because the topic is loud and everyone is focusing on that topic. Don't just copy what's trending for the sake of it trending. Speak from a place of authenticity, right? Speak from a place of how that topic that's trending relates to who you are or the work that you do. So if it's Human Rights Day or if it's Africa Child Day, you take that topic or that conversation and you tailor make it to who you are as a person, or you tailor make it to the mandate, vision, and mission of your organization, and then you take it from there. Creating shareable graphics and short reels, we spoke about that. Being consistent, we spoke about it. Respectful and authentic online. Respectful is a very, yeah, that one we often fail at that. Um, how do I say this in a way that does not offend anyone? Okay. I am a human rights activist, and I know how we tend to get as human rights activists. We need to, when we communicate, we need to understand that where your rights end or where yours starts, someone else's ends, right? And we also need to understand that every right has limitations, and you can't enforce your advocacy or your right onto someone. So when you communicate, you need to be very respectful in the way that you communicate. If you're an advocate that's advocating for Namibians to become born again believers, you need to be considerate of personal convictions, because for you to get to a point where you're advocating for something, it's because it started bothering you. You just didn't, you were not born with that. You were not born with that advocacy, right? The number of deaths, the number of child crimes probably frustrated you, and that's why you're advocating for that thing. So just be respectful in the way that you communicate. If someone comments something very vile on your post, it's not because they're trying to be nasty or anything. Sometimes it's just because the person really does not understand what you are advocating for, and that is then your job as the communicator to help that person understand. And that's why communications is important, and that's why you have to communicate strategically to be able to ensure that everyone in your audience understands why you're doing the specific thing that you're doing. And it's always important to be authentic, because from authenticity flows passion, and from passion flows authenticity. It's really just vice versa. If you're passionate about something, you're authentic about it. If you're authentic about something, you're passionate about it, because it comes from a genuine place of truth, right? Let's move on to the next. All right, real world inspirations. Um, as a communicator, you always need to take your audience through a roller coaster of reality. You need to show them the statistics of what's happening and why you are trying to bridge that gap. You need to show them um, if you're focusing on housing issues, show them that so Namibians are don't have homes, and because of the heavy rainfall that we had, so and so number of Namibians' homes got flooded, A, B, C, and D. So you need to give people real world inspiration. If you're speaking about elections or voting, as mentioned here, youth led voting registration campaigns, we always speak of how young people are unemployed, how Namibia has the youngest population in Africa, and things like that. So then, how do we mobilize young people to actually have a good voter turnout? So things like that. You need to use real world examples to lure your audience in to the messaging that you're trying to convey. And then community petitions, things like the Me Too movement, the hashtag shut it all down, even the protest that happened in Kenya because of that bill. Community petitions actually drive policy interventions. So do not underestimate the power of a community or a coalition. I love to call them a coalition because it basically means it's a group of people that are coming together to fight for a common goal, right? Or that is lobbying for a common goal. So if you are fighting for a specific bill and you want it to be tabled in parliament, you need to then get people to sign petitions, get a group of people together, a task force together, a coalition together that can drive that messaging, that can constantly push on social media, that can constantly keep your policymakers on their toes to be able to pass that bill, to be able to table that bill. Women-led radio storytelling cycles. I am a feminist. I love anything and everything youth, women related. So I'm very big on that. Storytelling through radio, either a series of podcasting where you are collaborating with the radio station to say, look, we established this platform, Ignite Corner, and we think it would really be important for a wider audience in Namibia to understand the essence of this topic we spoke about, and we think that this will really fit into. Media are always looking for stories. And media is there for the interest of the public and for the public good. So that in itself, just really either starting a podcast, signing your podcast up to Apple or Spotify, and then starting your advocacy on a podcast. And then next thing you know, UNESCO or the UN identifies your podcast and loves what you're speaking about. And then you get funding and then you go big. So communication starting on any level, whether it's through podcasting, through radio, through social media, through WhatsApp broadcast messaging, just start somewhere and just ensure that you are clear, that you're consistent, that you're authentic, and that you're really targeting a real life issue. Okay. I think, Ingrid, I will pause there for now in case there's anyone with any questions, anyone that wants any clarity on anything. If there's something that I've not mentioned and you probably had expectations when you came into the Zoom call, please feel free to ask. I will try as much as I can to answer the questions that you have. This presentation was really tailor-made to just help rural communities understand the power of communications and strategic communicating and how far it can take you as an individual or an organization to be able to drive your message. So I'll pause there for now, Ingrid, if there's anyone with questions or so.
Greetings, everyone, again. I see that we have new people that joined. Feel free to ask questions.
And if there are no questions, I actually have there's 3 questions under the reflect session. So if there's anyone that would like to share,
I am
you
trying
can
to
just.
raise my hand, but I guess Zoom doesn't have the raise hand function for the host.
Oh, okay. Yes.
But yes, I have a couple of questions that are
All right.
related to the topic,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them are questions, others are really just concerns.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot today through your presentation, and I was able to sort of put my questions and concerns into perspective, especially since we're talking about strategic communication and digital advocacy for rural impact, right? And with RuralRise, we've been working with a number of rural youth for the past couple of months. And we have realized, through our engagement that there is a need for us to develop a specific way to communicate to our rural youth, right? And through your presentation, of course, I've learned that I need to find common ground. I need to understand what is important to them. I need to understand how to speak to them. Also, sort of define the person I'm talking to, the age group, where they're coming from, their lived realities, and understanding who I'm talking to. And so this is why this platform is very important, especially for the rural rice volunteers and staff, to understand how to communicate to a certain group of people. And we've noticed, right, through our work, and I hope my colleagues will be able to, add some meat on this, is we would share information with our rural youth, explain, for example, how certain things work, um, especially on how they can do, for example, their stakeholder engagement locally in their rural areas, as well as fundraising activities in their rural areas. We will communicate this to them through multiple ways, using WhatsApp platforms, calling them, and all of that. Even, going as far as organizing sessions like these where we will have them on the call and explaining certain things on how they can sort of make work on enabling themselves to become independent, right? To be able to make whatever their dreams are a reality. However, after a couple of, let's say, weeks, let's say we just had a session. After a couple of weeks, we come back and the people are asking the same questions again, and it baffles me because it's like, how else should I communicate this information for them to grasp it? What am I not seeing? Right? What are we not seeing when we're communicating, or what are we not understanding when we are communicating to them? Or is it just a thing of consistent communication that we just need to keep communicating the same message, because what we're sharing with them is valuable information that if they apply it, it will definitely bring results. So that is pretty much a question and a concern that I have in terms of how do we engage our rural youth, because we need them to understand what we are sharing with them, and understand it in such a way that it enables them to act on it. Yeah,
Thank you
that's
so
the
much, Esme. Yeah, you shared quite a lot, honestly. You have raised an incredible question. Um, what are we not seeing, and how are we basically layering the information that we convey, and what is it that the youth or the people that you're engaging with do not understand, right? So I think sometimes the message is clear, right? The message is clear to us as the organizers, or the communicators, or the founders, or the person that understands the project. Because one thing we must not forget is that when Eslen founded RuralRises, or when Eslen decided to start this project, it was your dream alone as an individual, right? And you also had to battle procrastination with yourself before you decided to go public and go big. So it's sometimes very difficult for you to convince someone else to understand a specific thing that you are passionate about. So really, what you should probably ask yourself is the message actually clear to your audience, or is it just clear to you as the communicator? Because we understand the system, the language, and the urgency of doing things. But for our audience, in this case, rural youth, the message may be foreign to them. It might be intimidating, or it might be abstract, or maybe you need to meet them halfway, either in person, allow them to ask as many questions as they can. Um, I don't know, but something that is urgent to you as the organizer will not be as urgent to someone else that is just volunteering. What you are passionate about, it won't necessarily be something that someone else is passionate about. About repetition and reinforcement, I think you're right to ask, do we need to keep repeating ourselves? Yes and not, because people are not listening. If you're consistently repeating something, then that means that someone is not listening. Because if someone is listening, they will ask you right then and there, what did you mean by this? Because I tried doing A, B, C, and D, and it didn't work out for me. Instead of them coming back to you a week or two later after the call to say that I actually didn't understand what you were talking about, right? And learning doesn't just happen in one moment. I think that's one thing we also need to understand as project managers, as communicators, as marketing practitioners, that something you put out there then and once, it won't create a change overnight, right? There's behavior change, understanding, and even confidence takes time, because these rural youth volunteers that you're working with are probably people that have never done the type of work that you're expecting them to do. So just the lack of confidence or the lack of self-esteem or the lack of understanding the core mandate as to why you want them to do that specific task, right? And for many rural communities, they are navigating digital literacy gaps, trust gaps as well, and even trauma. You understand? I watched one of your videos from the community dialogue where people were speaking about alcohol and drug abuse. So imagine taking a young person from that place and grooming them into become an advocate. It will take time for them to actually believe in themselves too. So it might not be that they don't understand what you're saying. It might be something more deeper than what we think we can see on the surface. And sometimes we are transmitting information, but we are not translating it into something that feels relevant, that feels possible or empowering to this person. For example, when you talk about stakeholder engagement or fundraising, ask yourself, do they know what those words mean in their world? Like, what does it mean in their world? And sometimes we're looking at people that were disappointed by donors. I know you went to UTUSEP. UTUSEP, I know they deal a lot with crop farming, and they've been waiting for NamWater to install water. I'm not sure. I've not been there since last year, but all they saw was pipings, right? Pipings by NamWater, but no actual water. So it's also just a lack of trust. And now Eslin is also coming and she wants to bring about change. And people have already been disappointed so many times that they have lost all sense of trust in whoever comes and wants to help them bring about change within their community. And maybe also talk to the village headman or church leader and start with a raffle in your community at your workplace. Like ask your volunteers, what is it that you do not understand, right? Not as a boss lady, not as a CEO, not as a founder, but as a friend. As a friend, understand who the person is first. Speak to the person, get to know their background, where they come from, and understand how they do work, and then you take it from there. I see someone's hand is up. I'm just quickly rushing through so I can finish answering Eslin, and then we'll take it from there. Involve them in shaping the message, right? Instead of you designing everything from the get-go and then just bringing it to them, take them along in the process, get them involved, right? People support what they help build. So if someone is part of the process, they know that their hard work went into it. So if this message doesn't go out, or if this project is not done, then they are not just failing you or the organization, but they are also failing themselves. So try involving them into the communication process. Ask them what platforms work for them. You understand? Maybe we are using Instagram and LinkedIn and they want us to use TikTok. So ask them what type of platforms work for you, and meet them at their preferred platforms. Which words they prefer, you understand? Do they prefer do not, or do they prefer don't? Things like that. Do they prefer slang? Do they prefer British English or US English? You ask them, what is it that you prefer as a young person? And who they trust to deliver the message. Have they identified a specific person in their volunteer group to say that, Ingrid, you are going to be the face and you are going to be the one to communicate for us, and things like that, you understand? And maybe the message needs to come from a peer and not from RuralRises directly. Maybe a local success story needs to be shared by someone to say that when I did A, B, C, and D with one economy, they really changed my life. And this is what they did for me. Sometimes it doesn't have to come from management or the founder or whatever. Sometimes it has to come from someone within the community that was actually impacted by the work that you were doing. And you may not always see immediate results, but seeds are being planted, you understand? The fact that you've started this beautiful empowerment movement, and the fact that you have done so much in, I don't know, more than 6 communities, that speaks volumes. So some will sprout next month, others next year, but you just keep showing up, you keep speaking, you keep listening, you keep doing what you have to do. So, yeah, I hope I've answered your question or basically helped you figure a few things out.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I-
Yes, you did. Thank you
okay,
very much. Yes.
all right.
Mm.
Crystalline?
Yes, I just wanted to, you pretty much highlighted everything that I wanted to say. I wanted to give a bit of a highlight in terms of my experience with dealing with rural communities, but also touching a bit on the expectations I had for the session was really what Eslin has mentioned. How does one actually communicate to the rural communities themselves? And I did hear you have highlighted a few generic approaches to communicating. What are some of the things to look out for? But maybe just in summary, really what has worked for us, or for me in all the platforms I've worked, the consistency in communication as well as following up in that. So consistency does not necessarily mean you are just repeating what you are saying. You are repeating, but you are using different methods. You are changing it up from time to the message, the core message still remains the same, but you change it up depending on how much of how the information is being absorbed by people. So you are busy exploring what is it that you didn't understand. Can we try this different method? Is it understandable still? So it's consistency, but really improving the message as you go, improving on how it's delivered. And then what was also mentioned, exploring different communication methods that the communities are used to. And sometimes you might want to introduce something new. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of times it takes a bit longer for people to accept and appreciate something new. So you might want to start using what are people used to? Do they normally meet under a tree and have a conversation about a certain, what existing platforms are there? Maybe the village council, the church leaders, those are usually what stand out when it comes in schools, even when it comes to rural communities, and what I've seen works. And then you have, of course, your community, what we call the community ambassadors, which I think our presenter today has mentioned. Who are those community members that you can trust to really help deliver your message when you are not there and consistently deliver? And then the other one is also what was mentioned, including them in decision making on interventions that affect them particularly. How whatever is affecting them, how are you bringing them into that space of really advising you? And again, you might think this is good for them, but do they think it's good for them? So trying to strike that balance is something that is tough, but at the end of the day, once they understand the benefits and they buy into the idea, then it should be smooth sailing from there. Um, Building trust, very important, but this also takes a bit of time. The last one I did want to highlight is quite recently we started using what we call industrial theater. I know it sounds very technical, but it's a method of sort of sending a message using play. And this could be, whatever program you're running, if you're doing it at a school and you really want to drive a certain message. There are certain people that perform industrial theater where they play a certain scenario, but then they stop halfway to ask communities about what they think is going to happen or what do they think is right, and then the play continues with what the audience has said is right. So that is kind of a way of cementing the message, especially when you are dealing with young people. And that for me really works well. We've tried it a few times and it was spectacular. It was enjoyable, it was engaging, but also at the same time I feel the message was really cemented. I just wanted to highlight a few of that, and once again thank you so much for this session.
Wow, so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate how grounded and experience rich your reflections are. It really touches on the power of physical connection, because if you're speaking about place and that having worked for you, it means that the power of doing something physical and really connecting with your audience and doing things on ground is what works. You have beautifully articulated something we sometimes overlook in communications, that consistency doesn't mean repetition without reflection. Thank you. I learned that today. That's a good point. It's not
You're
about
welcome.
saying the same thing over and over. It's about evolving the way we deliver that message. That is really
Absolutely.
powerful. Yeah, that is really powerful. Thank you so much. I hope everyone took away that. I personally also learned so much. But just to summarize what Chris Aline said is that it's a lesson for all of us. Effective role communication requires patience. I think patience. It requires presence. It requires persistency and humility. We must be willing to learn as we go, adjust our methods, and honor the ways in which rural communities already communicate and organize themselves. And I think that was just beautifully said. So, thank you so much, Mr. Lynn. I really appreciate it. Ingrid?
Thank you so much, Miss Jessica. We came to the end of our Ignite Corner. With that being said, I would like to thank Miss Jessica, our guest speaker, for sharing such valuable insights today. This session was really a mind opening session. Your time and thoughtful contributions are truly appreciated, Miss Jessica. To everyone that turned up today, thank you for taking time to join us. And we hope to see you at our next Ignite Corner session. We'll communicate with the poster again. Thank you again. Until next time. Take care.
Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Ingrid and the RuralRises team. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and then we can see how we can contribute to one another's work. Thank you so much.